Welcome to the 20th annual Ashland Independent Film Festival. 20 years of bringing you independent film. We're here to do the Q&A for our program Short Stories 1 on Success. I'm John Stadelman. I'm the senior programmer for short narrative film. And I am thrilled to have so many of our filmmakers here. I hope it's just a smorgasbord of great talent all brought together right here. So again, I want to thank all of our filmmakers for making this effort, for coming out to be with us, and for letting us show their wonderful films. I thought the best way to start this, I'm going to try to go through your films in the order in which they're being shown here. So I thought that would be useful for the audience. And so we'll start with, I just want to sort of identify you in that order, and then also let you talk a little bit about the inception of the idea for your film, where it came from, and how it manifested. So I'm going to start with Paige Compton, who made the film Guide On. There, thanks, Paige. That hand wave helps. That's great. Guide On is the film about the young recruit trying to carry on her family's Guide On tradition. So Paige, go ahead and tell us a little bit about how you came up with the idea of doing this.
Well, I am an Army veteran, and I actually started with an idea of something that actually happened to me when I was in basic training. And then with the help of Tara, who's on this as well, we were able to develop, build on that original story, shrink it down to a short film size, and really hone in the emotional beats. So it's loosely based on an idea of something that actually happened to me.
Were you part? I've never heard of the Guide On tradition. It was it was absolutely new to me, the whole idea of it. Was that what you were? Does that come from you? Is that, or your friend?
No, it was me. It was me. So the original story was when I was in basic training. I saw a graduation happening in the distance from a unit that had finished basic. And I saw, and they're all in their camouflage uniforms, and they all look the same. And the one person that stands out is a person carrying their unit colors. And I wanted my mom to be able to see me graduate. So I asked to do it. And my drill sergeant didn't think I could do it because he's never had a female Guide On bearer. So I took that and ran with it, and never, ever, ever gave in or gave up on wanting to just have it at the end of the day. So I just took that idea and built it with my team over the course of a few months.
So it wasn't a family tradition, but it was a dream, essentially. Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. Okay, well, I'm going to try to keep moving around the ring here. The next film that you see is My Hero. And unfortunately, right now, we don't have Logan Jackson with us. We're trying to get him, so hopefully he'll join a little later. So I'm going to move on to About Francis, which is a film by Jordan Axelrod. Thanks, Jordan.
Hey,
yeah, tell us about it, Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pieces that kind of were floating around for a bit that sort of gelled together for this piece, but kind of the one of the main elements is Frances, played by Roberta Platt, who's actually a cousin of mine, and she lives in New York, and I became closer with her when I moved up here to go to school. So every time I'd see her at the holidays, she'd kind of plead for a role. She had acted in her past, or she's still active. She's still doing theater, but so it was kind of a running joke every time I'd see her. I'd say, one day I'll have a part, one day I'll have a part. And finally, I had the idea to work with her, and then there's the musical element of the film, which is Shanice Alife she's a New York City based performer. And I saw her performing on the subway platform, I think it was 6 years ago now. And I was kind of, from that point, I was like, oh, she's got something very special that I'd love to capture and share. So sort of, these two disconnected people in my life that I came to know, but putting them together in a film, it seemed like it would work in some way. And then kind of grappling with my own thoughts and ideas about like what it means to tell a story and where the purpose lies in the act of storytelling. Kind of felt like it was they were all sort of drifting around and gelling together, which is kind of how About Frances came to be what it was. Yeah.
I should have mentioned that About Frances is the film with sort of two narrative threads. One following a young writer who's trying to get a gig writing a biography about Frances, and the other a young woman who's a busker essentially in Brooklyn and trying to come up with a new song. So and essentially it sounds to me like you might fill the shoes of the young writer. I mean, is that sort of
there are part? I mean, I certainly found my way into it through that. Like there's a few relationships. A lot of the characters are based on people that I know from New York and from my family up here. And people that I became closer with in my time living here. Like the scene in the Chinese restaurant in Wohop is like very. He's a friend of mine, and he's kind of playing a slightly exaggerated version of himself. And I'd say we've had similar conversations like that. Maybe not exactly about this an identical situation, but yeah, I was playing with some of the folks in my life to see where we could kind of craft a narrative out of that. So
I want to talk about that some more when we come back around about your use of non-professionals. It was very. I'm going to move on to. I'm going to get this right. Maria Soledad Laici from Argentina, who made the film about the young girl helping her mother deliver a baby across the countryside. Maria, can you talk a little bit about the inception of that idea?
Yes. The short film is based on a real event. It was born when I met a peasant woman in the south of Argentina when I was doing a documentary film. So I interviewed this woman during a year, and she told me about a lot of events in her life, but when she shared this event, I was impacted because she told me like one more thing in her life, and I couldn't understand how she could go with her little girl across the country to the hospital, and she told me that's life here, and she knows the place, so it's all right. And well, I feel that I have to talk with her a lot of more, and I feel this need to share with everyone this story.
It was extremely powerful, and I think you talk about minimalism, and that is a classic example of a kind of a nice clear thread taking you from the beginning to the end of the film. Very strong. Great. Okay, let's move on to Feeling Through, and that is Doug Roland, and you're in my screen. You're in the center, Doug. Is that you? Can you wave to it?
Yes. Hi, Doug.
All right. Yes, and Doug's film is the film about the young Black teen kid who ends up helping something I'd actually never heard before, a deafblind person across the street to get home. Actually, go ahead. Talk a little bit about that idea.
Yeah, so that was, though the film is fictionalized, it was heavily inspired by a real life encounter that I had 10 years ago with the first person who's deafblind that I ever met. So some of the central story beats were inspired directly from that experience. Similarly to what you see at the top of the film, 10 years ago when I was still living in New York City, where I'm from, I was coming home late one night and saw a man standing on a street corner holding a sign that said, "I'm deaf and blind and need help crossing the street." I ended up tapping him. He wrote in a notepad a bus stop he needed. And when I got there, I saw the bus wasn't coming for a long time. And I wanted to let him know I'd sit and wait with him, but I didn't know how to communicate with him. So I just instinctively took his palm and started tracing one letter at a time on it to let him know I'd wait. He understood what I wrote, and we ended up having a whole conversation that way over the next hour plus, waiting for his bus. And it was a really impactful experience on a number of levels. One, I had never met anyone who was deafblind before. But beyond that, the uniqueness and intimacy and of communicating in that manner with someone that you just met, like literally tracing your finger along their palm, the concertedness with which you need to communicate, but also moreover that he was this very charismatic, lovely guy that I felt like I'd really made a connection with during that experience. And it was something that really stuck with me for a long time after.
I'm curious, Doug, weren't you at least initially sort of suspicious? There's so much scamming, that kind of thing that you see in New York or hear about.
I wasn't suspicious. I mean, there wasn't anything in approaching him that seemed anything other than, what was expressed on the card that he was holding. So I didn't have any I guess maybe being a lifelong New Yorker, maybe you get a good sense of reading what a situation, whether it's legitimate or not, but there didn't seem to strike me. There wasn't anything that struck me as not legitimate about the situation when I first approached this man. Artemio was his name in real life.
You just had the sense that it was okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. All right, great. And then finally we come. Oh, by the way, congratulations on you're an Oscar nominee, aren't you? I mean.
Yes, thank you. We are thrilled and honored to be a part of the ceremony this year.
Very exciting. It's really very exciting. So then finally we come to Metro 6 animation with Geoff Hecht. Hi.
Hi.
And can you tell us a little bit? This is I ended the program with it because it's just so fun, and Lord knows we need fun. A wild piece of animation. Now, what's interesting about this, Geoff, is that you say 78 artists collaborated in parallel across 17 different countries. So are you the person who started the whole thing? Are you the first, pebble in the pond?
Yeah, this is actually in a different order than I'm used to talking a little bit about it, but back in 2009, I'd gone to animation school, and usually when you go to school like animation school, you're thinking about like Pixar or Star Wars or making fantasy worlds, but I was essentially working on pictures of digital cell phones just rotating in 3D space. So instead of making imaginary worlds or fantastical things, I was essentially working on the next Samsung. And I had a colleague at the time who would tell me about his daily adventures, just coming in every day with public transit, just A to B, just coexisting with his community. And that was a callback to my childhood, just growing up here in San Francisco. My mom, a single mom, worked about 15 different jobs, and I started riding public transit alone by the time I was 8 years old. And so just being exposed in such a small space, different people from different backgrounds, sexualities, ways of thought, profession, race, I felt like that really shaped me for the man that I am. And I had never met my dad, so to a certain degree, I just felt like the city of San Francisco and the people of public transit helped raise me. I had left my job in 2009, went freelance, and I didn't start production on Metro 6 until about 2015. And 3 years in, I realized we were just not going to get this done in the small San Francisco office that we had. And I got really fortunate because we got featured on a remote collaboration platform called Artella in the start of 2018. And that paired us up with artists all across the globe. We had collaborators from Africa, from South America, the UK, Spain, Canada, various parts of the US, etc. And essentially we went from a spot of not knowing how the heck we could finish this to finishing in the last 2 years, right at the start of 2020, just in time to have everything closed down for the pandemic.
It's just remarkable because the film itself is about finding a community, not realizing that you found it until you find it.
Yeah, absolutely.
you created a community, but by making it. So that's a terrific story.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You bet. Excuse me, are you Tara?
I'm Tara.
Tara. That's that was a name I was going to ask about. I'm so sorry. Yes. Well, good, because we've come back around to Guide On again, which is terrific. And I sort of wanted to talk to you. Definitely, I wasn't sure you were going to be here, so I'm sorry I didn't come to you immediately.
That's okay.
How did the production part of Guide On go in terms of you two connecting with each other, and you taking over that rather complicated job? That had you had troops in that show, in that film. I mean, there wasn't just a couple of people,
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely something we considered in development, was how are we going to fill this screen on a very limited budget. And I actually think the craziest thing that happened to us was we were set to shoot right after Thanksgiving in 2019 and had a location up in Angeles Forest. And then on Thanksgiving, it snowed.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh my God.
we couldn't feasibly get our crew up there and back down every day. So we spent Thanksgiving, Paige and I and our cinematographer spent Thanksgiving weekend finding a new location, shifting dates a little bit, and essentially reworking an entire production with about 4 days, logistically speaking, shifted everything.
Were you at AFI at the same time? Is that how that connection happened?
Yeah, this was our thesis film. So we teamed very early on. So I came into the process really early, and Paige and I were close, and I knew her story, and I thought that her story was amazing and worthy of a film, because you don't often see female drill sergeants, you don't see women who are ambitious and succeeding in the Army, and you certainly don't see people in boot camp trying to stand out. So I thought those were all really exciting things, and the fact that they came from a real story was very inspiring to me.
I couldn't agree more, and that real story is even more impressive. I guess it seems to me, Paige, that Guide On is the most clearly belongs in this on success category, because it's really about a young woman setting her goals and just working fearlessly to achieve it. And really, it's your life story. I mean, for the rest of you who don't know it, I think she was Obama and Biden's videographer, essentially. I mean, tell us more about that.
Yeah, so that's so I did 7 years in the military. In the last 4 years that I was in, I was recruited to go work at the White House Communications Agency. And my job there was audiovisual. So it was sound and lighting and video work for all the live events that the 44th president and vice president did, like all over the world. So we had like travel teams that jumped everywhere. I was there for the campaign of 2012. It was just insane, and worked my way up from a tech to an audiovisual director. And I gained a lot of essential, like on the spot leadership, kind of like creativity, problem solving, and all of that, like in that particular gig. It was a pretty incredible job. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I mean, like I said, incredible. It really feels like that your life is embodied in the success of this young woman in the film. It really is great. And AFI, I mean, we almost always have a film here from their school. I think the product is just amazing what they turn out at, in terms of what kind of an education you both got together. All right. It looks like we may get Logan Jackson for My Hero here in just a little bit. But while we're waiting, let's move on to talk a little bit about Francis, to Jordan Axelrod again, about the process of his idea of casting professionals and non-professionals and working with them at the same time. What's that like? What's that? What made you decide to do that? I mean.
Well, so my previous narrative film, I was working with all trained actors, and we had a similar approach where we started with the treatment from a place of improv, and then built the script out of that. So we worked for a month, and then the shooting script came from that. So this time I was thinking that because there was something a bit more fluid about this one, where the pieces were gonna like grow to the greater meaning with the music and these tapes and all this kind of material that's coming together. I just felt like it would be fun to play with we went a little bit further with the improv, and we were just kind of setting each situation up based on that individual moment to see what all these pieces coming together would actually amount to. So and then it was
not heavily scripted.
Well, there were scenes that were scripted and some weren't. So like the Chinese restaurant scene, that it was just a matter of like finding the way that was going to get us to the scene that would best serve the film. So that scene I wrote scripted. I wrote it in beat form, and then it was just a matter of kind of running through it with the actors and finding these moments. So yeah, it was really about taking each moment as it was and seeing what served it. Like the scene with Norma, the woman that the writer goes to speak with. She had never acted before, but that was when we were shooting it. It felt like it was a scripted scene. We had rehearsed it to the point that they knew where it was going. So each time it was getting deeper, but it wasn't. Even if the words weren't written, if she never had a script written down, it was still, the scene was a scene by the time we shot it.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, so it just kind of felt like the right approach to this one with so many different characters and faces coming in that I kind of wanted the person to that I thought would best kind of build this community within the film to be in it, rather than trying to get people to be like them, I guess.
You referred to 70s film in one little interview that I read of you from yours. Yeah. You like 70s film a whole lot, and the expression that you said was cultivate the uncontrollable.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that was actually it's a little convoluted of a connection, but the writer director of Sound of Metal, Darius Martyr, is he was a neighbor of a cousin of mine who actually is Roberta, who plays Francis's son. So it's kind of this convoluted thing, but I got coffee with him once, and that was the advice he had left me with, is like to cultivate the uncontrollable, which is, in this case, was kind of setting up these situations that would create a result that you couldn't necessarily anticipate from the get-go, and ultimately it becomes cohesive, but kind of going with a bit of the unknown, which I think is fun to approach any project with.
It does. Hey, we've got Logan Jackson here. Logan, can you hear me? Yay! Hi. My name's John Stadelman. I'm the senior programmer in charge of short narrative film, and absolutely loved your movie. Just loved it. And congratulations on getting Best U.S. Short at the Palm Springs Film Festival. Pretty cool. Very cool. I've been to that years ago. Great festival. Intense festival. What we started out by doing, Logan, we were just talking about the inception of the ideas for the films. That's what audiences always want to know, where'd you come up with the idea? So My Hero is the story about the African-American mom who heads off for a job interview. She has to leave her kids home alone. You can go ahead and sort of take it from there.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John. Apologize for being late, but
as you're here.
Yeah, thank you. My Hero, the story is all personal experience. Every time I try to tell a story, whatever form it's in, I try to do it with my heart and with a lot of passion. So this story came from a very personal situation that happened to my friend Brandon Elliott, who passed in a very similar situation. And also it's inspired from my sister, who is a single mother, and she has 2 young boys that she has to take care of solely by herself. And, sometimes you have to make those tough decisions to leave your kids home alone, whether it's for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour, whatever the time length is, you're doing it with a risk. It's a risk that you have to accept because you don't have that luxury of leaning on someone else for help. Mm-hmm. So I see her put on that cape every single day and do what she has to do. So she's my strength. And I just wanted to show that side of single parenthood, and maybe people can use some empathy and not be so quick to judge.
Oh, I mean, I felt the film was definitely addressed the whole issue epilepsy, but to me, it's about poverty in America. I mean, that was just so central. We're at the stage, we're going through the group the second time now, sort of asking specific questions. And I have to ask you about your handling of those unbelievably charming children. How did you get those performances out of those kids? They're so natural.
Yeah, it's interesting because for this script to work, for this story to work, it had to be very authentic and it had to be very grounded in a sense of authenticity. So I actually had a lot of dialogue written for the kids, but every time they tried to deliver it when they came to rehearsals, it came across as too plastic and too rehearsed. So I said, you know what, guys, let's just strip that away and I just want you guys to have fun. So every competition that you see within the film, a dance off or a wrestling match, I would give them little incentives, like whoever win this, they would get ice cream or pizza. So they were trying their hearts out to like best one another. And that brought out the natural performances in the kids. Anytime you just entice them with ice cream, they'll do whatever.
Oh, ice cream was the ticket. That's what I should have known.
Yeah.
So, and then the other thing is that the conversation, the monologue essentially that the mother has to do when she's trying to find a babysitter on the phone. How scripted was that? And, was that improv by her? I mean, how did you guys work on that section together?
Yeah, that was scripted. But of course she added a little bit within her own. The thing about Avery, who plays it, she's a method actor, so she makes the piece herself. She becomes one with the film. And that was a very important piece of the film. I know 15 seconds in within a short film, if the audience isn't hooked, chances are they're going to turn it off and not really be as interested. So I wanted to make that come across as very clear cut and very heavy. And she did a great job of just embodying that role. And the bus stop scene that you've seen was all improv. That's all her.
That's just fantastic. She really, I mean, the whole film has that quality to it that just really, and there was one other thing I wanted to ask you about, but now it's gone out of my brain, of course. I should have written it down, but I didn't. So maybe I'll come back. So, but I also want to keep moving through all your fellow filmmakers here. Okay, let's go on to back to 12 kilometers. Maria, you there?
Yes.
I have a kind of an interesting question for you, and I we'll see whether or not you agree even. One of the things that interested me about your film is the way you decided to deliver the narrative, that there are breaks in the narrative. I could count 3 where you would get to a certain point and then you expect to go on and instead you jump. The story jumps ahead. It jumps ahead. And what's interesting about that is that had to be a choice on your part. I mean, for example, the young girl, at first you think she's not going to go with her mom, and then she just does. There's a couple of places on the way you think she's not going to catch the truck, and she does. You think she's not going to make it to the hospital, and she does. There are these narrative jumps. So what brought about that decision in terms of the way you tell a story?
We talk a lot with my team when I was editing the story, but I decided to construct the short film in that way because I want to remark the will of the girl. Mm-hmm. So when her mother told her, you are not going with me to the hospital, no, she was. And then she told her, now you are going to walk on the road, and she decided to cross the country. And well, I want to confirm that that girl have to decision to go to the hospital, and she can go and I don't know.
I think I see what you're saying is that in essence, those jumps are show us her character. They show her willfully moving ahead, willfully heading forward, the little girl. And what I think is wonderful about them, about those jumps, is that they demand that the audience follow that. We have, as an audience, we have to catch up. We have to catch up with what's happening. So I thought it was, for minimalism, it was a really good choice in terms of keeping that very strong linear narrative jumping ahead, keeping it just ahead of us.
Yes.
So, bravo.
That's what I did. Thank you.
All right. Back to feeling through with Doug. You had, is deafblind an actual category of differently abled people? Is that, I'd never heard of it before.
Yeah, the deafblind community is a community that's actually not that small either. It's been historically not addressed in really any form of media, but there are a lot of deafblind people in this country and around the world. And I worked with the Helen Keller National Center to make this film and to cast our deafblind actor, Robert Tarango. And they're an institution that is the foremost institution in this country, in the United States, providing training and independent living skills for people who are deafblind.
Mm-hmm. And so when you say you worked with them, in what way did you work with them?
So going back over 3 years now is when I first connected with Sue Rosensky, who's now the CEO of the parent company, Helen Keller Services. And, I initially reached out because I said I had a film that, I wanted to cast a deafblind actor in, and I wanted to work alongside the community and make sure that it was something that, I needed help finding this actor to start with. And beyond that, I wanted to make sure that his story was the most authentic and best representation of the community. Knowing that there was a particular responsibility, given that there really aren't any stories that are about or include the deafblind community. And we've worked together side by side, for 3+ years now, not just in casting and making the film, but also creating fully accessible screening events that are made accessible so that people who are deafblind, blind, and low vision can participate and experience the film alongside everyone else as well. So it's been quite a journey working alongside the National Center.
You've had I'm going to forget her name, Marie Maitland.
Marlee Matlin.
Marlee Matlin. Has she's been a big supporter of your film, right?
Yeah, Marlee Matlin's one of our executive producers, and she's used her platform to help raise more awareness about the film and bring it to more people, which has been really tremendous. And, it was an honor to partner with her in this because she's someone who I admired prior to working with her as someone who's not only, an Academy Award winning actor and someone who's done great work throughout her career, but also been an amazing advocate for the disability community in film. So she was, she's been an amazing person to collaborate with on this.
In terms of working with your deafblind actor, were you tracing your instructions on his palm? How do you communicate with somebody who's deafblind? So
we had a great interpreting team that I worked with throughout this entire process, and Robert joins me in a lot of our discussions about the film as well. So we still are working with that interpreting team, and the deafblind community is a very diverse community. Whenever you have a dual layered sensory loss, then the amount of ways in which that can manifest is quite broad. But in Robert's case, he's someone who was born deaf. He has something called Usher syndrome, which is the leading cause of deafblindness, and usually that's either being born deaf or hard of hearing and losing your hearing first, and then progressively losing your eyesight. Anywhere from early adolescence to later adulthood. So now in his mid 50s, he has very limited eyesight. I guess you could say it's like pinhole vision that's a little foggy, that under a lot of conditions, he can't see anything at all, like at night where we shot the whole film. So we used different lighting setups to allow him to still rely on what vision he had. We used what's called haptics, which is touch communication, where that usually happens in someone's back or shoulder, where you can communicate various things to someone in more of a short form kind of way when we needed to work more quickly and efficiently. And then for a lot of people in the deafblind community, they rely on tactile ASL, which is ASL that's signed into the hand and felt with your hand. So there are a number of different techniques in which you can employ. In our case, we did various lighting setups as well as haptics, which is a form of touch communication.
All right, well, thanks. And then coming back to Metro 6 with Geoff Hecht, with these 78 artists, I mean, constructing an animated film involves coming up with sequences, and there's lots of sequences in this film. How many of these things, are you the sole creative, juice behind this? In other words, did you come up with each of the sequences and then sort of direct them long distance? Or how did you make the 78 artists that worked on this
well,
together?
I think animation can usually either be a script-driven show or a board-driven show. And when I first started, it was mostly just beats and trying to define some rough boards. And took it a great deal. And then at a certain point, I worked with a very talented storyboard artist in Natasha Kanapa, and as well as Mahmoud Zaini. And both of them brought really great ideas to the film. Zaini, kind of like his name, tended to bring very fun and adventurous ideas. And I think Natasha was better at finding a certain cohesive thread to it.
Mm-hmm.
One difficulty is it's so frenetic in terms of action packed. There's really no wasted time in the short. We ended up having about 200 shots in the period of, I think actually we had 200 shots in 9 minutes, but we cut that down to about 7 minutes and 30 seconds. It really moves.
Yes,
And
it does.
because of that, on a slower moving dialogue sort of piece, we have no dialogue in it. You could do 3 storyboards for a shot, but we have shots that end up having to do about 30 boards per shot, and you bring that into an animatic. And so what worked for us was that sometimes as a director, you're sitting there and you're looking at a bunch of very loose drawings and you're really not sure if it's going to hit the emotional mark.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened is we would lock off sections one after the other that was starting to work. And then if another section next to it wasn't quite hitting the mark, then we would then attack that section one by one until it started to really hit a certain cohesiveness. And then once it got to the point where it was almost footage, we were able to bring in more of a experienced editor to be able to look at it, because I think most editors are looking at these rough doodles and you're like, I don't know what the heck is going on.
Right.
So Ian Montgomery of Pre-Future Films, he came in and ended up rearranging some of the shots in ways that I personally I never even would have thought of it, in terms of I think we originally started the film that we're going to see the people that he was going to meet with, because he had like a big job interview or something like that, but it ends up getting rearranged more towards the middle, and it's more impactful in that way. So it was really it was a huge driving force for me, in that I took a very Field of Dreams approach as a director, that I built as much as possible, thinking that if I built it, people would realize, hey, this guy's serious.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what drew people to work on our film versus others, because there's a lot of people that want to do these things.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's just great. And Logan, I remember the thing it wasn't even almost an ask you, it was just to tell you how much I liked the subtlety of the epileptic fit when it finally happens is so perfect. I just thought that was, you almost don't notice it. It seems like it just, and I think that's what that's like in real life, I think. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, I mean, and that's the thing that we wanted to come across, because it's a very real situation and it happens every day. And that's how my friend Brandon Elliott, who the film is dedicated to, passed.
Yep.
It was a very settled thing, and the triggers are effortless sometimes, and it can happen at a spur of the moment. So we definitely wanted to keep that as authentic as possible.
It was
Thank
brave. It's brave to do it. Brave to keep it as understated as that was. Really good. And the kid, I mean, he looked like he was having an epileptic fit to me. That was really scary. It was
He shocked me on that one. He did very, very well on that. I was not expecting him to perform as great as he did, but he did. He was great.
Well, Soledad, Tara, Doug, Geoff, Jordan, Paige, and Logan, thank you all again so much for coming. This has just been a joy to talk to, and I'm so excited for our audience to see your films. I hope you guys, do what Geoff did if you haven't gone and looked at the other films in your group. I think you're in for a treat. They're really fun, and they do fit together. I know success is kind of a term that's layered with smugness, but that's not what I meant at all by this. This is all of these films offer a little moment of joy and triumph, and we all need that now. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.